A multi-story building in Gaza housing the offices of the US-based Associated Press and Qatar-based broadcaster Al Jazeera, as well as other offices and apartments, have collapsed on Saturday after being struck by Israeli missiles. Here's a news report on what unfolded.
This is the moment an Israeli missile strike destroyed a high-rise building housing the Associated Press, Al Jazeera, and other office spaces and homes in Gaza on Saturday. The owner of the building and journalists here are pleading on the phone with an Israeli intelligence officer who warned them the attack was coming and to evacuate. Al Jazeera's correspondent Wael Al-Dadou reporting that they didn't have time to grab their equipment. Israel says the building housed assets belonging to Hamas's military intelligence, the latest of many such attacks that Israeli forces say are a response to the thousands of Hamas rockets fired toward Israel in the last few days. Meanwhile, the civilian toll of the conflict and civil unrest across Israel and the Palestinian territories is mounting. There are fears that Gaza's only power station may run out of fuel within days, and foreign aid is starting to trickle in. Morocco is sending 40 tons of medical supplies, food and blankets to the West Bank and Gaza. Egypt is also sending ambulances into Gaza to try and bring Palestinians back to Egyptian hospitals. Palestinian medics say over 100 people have been killed in Gaza, including dozens of children. This man, a Gaza resident named Ahmad Yaqoubi, says planes hit his neighbor's building, which housed a family of 10. Mark Reedman lives across the border in the town of Ashdod, Israel. At least 9 people have died in Israel, also including children.
There was an explosion, a hard one. We had a rocket hitting our building. We live over here. I heard the sound of windows splashing, windows falling off the building. A lot of, people screaming. Right? I have 3 kids, small ones, and I need to handle, explaining them what happened here and why this is happening. So it's not a trivial situation.
Diplomatic efforts to stop the crisis have shown no sign of progress.
The Israel-Gaza conflict peaked on Friday after Hamas fired more than 1,600 rockets into Israel on Thursday, killing 7 people in the Jewish country. The Israeli forces hit back and launched a series of airstrikes into the Gaza Strip.
Israel threatens ground invasion of Hamas-ruled territory in Gaza as the two enemies plunge closer to all-out war. In a sign of escalating tensions, Israel has now massed thousands of troops, tanks and armored vehicles close to the border with Gaza. The massive build-up after Hamas militants fired one barrage of rockets after the another into Israel, targeting civilian areas for the 4th straight day, in a sign of escalation of tension and violence along the Gaza Strip. Hamas fired more than 1,600 rockets into Israel, which has resulted in loss of 7 lives and several injuries. Several people have been forced to rush to bomb shelters, and the Iron Dome rocket defense system has been in action, almost continuously destroying incoming rockets in the air. Israeli security forces hit back, launching a number of airstrikes into the Gaza Strip. The Israeli security forces have called it a complex and first-of-its-kind operation, taking out the Hamas leadership and launch pads with pinpoint accuracy.
It's unfortunately escalating, and we have been trying for quite a while to de-escalate the situation. This didn't start today. It started several days ago, and we were trying in Jerusalem. It started in Jerusalem, and we were trying to de-escalate the situation there. But Hamas has determined that it will stir things up and it will make trouble. It's trying to get control of the Palestinian Authority, and this is its way to do it.
The administration on the Gaza Strip claimed over 100 lives have been lost, including 17 children in Israeli airstrikes. More than 600 civilians have been injured. Israeli Air Force brought down a 6-storied residential building in the heart of the Gaza Strip, claiming that the building housed the top leadership of Hamas, including its security and intelligence chiefs. Israel also claimed that sufficient time had been given to residents to clear out the building before the airstrikes were carried out. Israel has used precision-guided munition to target specific buildings in the airstrikes.
The defense activity of Iron Dome batteries is giving us an offensive space, and the IDF has already attacked hundreds of targets. We will soon pass 1,000. We continue striking Hamas while defending our citizens.
Both the United Nations and the United States are closely monitoring the situation and have called for reduction in tension. But given the strong statements from both sides, the tension is only set to escalate. Bureau Report, India Today.
India Today's senior executive editor Gaurav Sawant spoke to Israeli Defense Forces spokesperson Captain Libby Weiss on the Israel-Hamas conflict. Listen in.
And joining me on India First is Captain Libby Weiss, the spokesperson of the Israeli Defense Forces, who joins me from Ground Zero. Captain Weiss, what's the latest situation on ground where you are?
Well, the situation has been extremely tense in the last few days here. Hamas at this stage has fired about 2,000 rockets towards Israel. About 1 million Israelis have spent the last few days in and out of shelters. The IDF has struck several Hamas targets within the Gaza Strip, really trying to prevent them from having the capability of being able to launch those rockets. And I'm actually here standing not too far from an Iron Dome battery, which has been life-saving for Israelis here. So it's been a very, very tense situation.
Captain Weiss, multiple fighter jets have carried out air-to-ground attack sorties. Were the Hamas leadership, military leadership on target? Did you succeed?
Yeah, so the targets have been Hamas infrastructure, Hamas intelligence facilities, weapons storage facilities, weapons launchers, command and control centers, communication centers, really everything having to do with Hamas's business of terror in the Gaza Strip. And yes, we have been very successful in these strikes.
Okay. The Palestinian Ministry of Health says more than 110 fatalities, including women and children. Israel stands accused of using disproportionate force to carry out these punitive strikes.
I think it's important to note that we make a really significant effort to limit the impact on civilians in the Gaza Strip, despite the fact that Hamas really builds their entire infrastructure among and under and next to the civilian population. Hamas uses apartment buildings to store rockets, uses businesses as communication centers, and really is using the population there. But in the IDF, we are making a very, very significant effort to minimize that impact. We call residents before strikes are going to happen, telling them to vacate. We send text messages. And we really try to do everything that is possible to minimize that impact, despite the fact that Hamas, of course, doesn't do that at all, not with the civilians in Gaza and certainly not with the civilians here in Israel.
Okay. But Palestinians accuse Israel of not even sparing the dead, ma'am. They say that the Israeli Air Force, they've even bombed cemeteries. Cemeteries have been bombed. The dead can't even rest in peace.
I can't confirm that. I don't know that information. But again, I would really urge the question to go towards Hamas, which is why they are hiding weapons in civilian areas, why they are building their entire infrastructure in civilian areas. And of course, we, again, make every effort to minimize that impact. Any loss of innocent life is tragic, and it's certainly not our goal. But the question really of why this infrastructure exists within the civilian community in Gaza is really a question for Hamas.
Okay. What can you tell us about the kind of weapons that are being used by the Hamas, the rockets that they're using in this assault in 2021, how are they different from the rockets that were used in the last conflict?
Yeah, so Hamas has a very, very expansive arsenal of rockets that we have seen. Of course, 2,000 of those have been launched. We also saw them for the first time use an armed drone that we were able to intercept yesterday. So certainly, we don't underestimate them in any way. We understand that they've invested significant resources in really building up their terror capabilities.
Okay, so where would they have got an armed drone from, and what is your assessment? We are told close to 1,800 to 2,000 rockets have been fired by Hamas so far. How long will their rockets last? And do you see the situation escalating in times to come? Do you see a ground assault happen in the next several hours or days?
Through our strikes, we have made a significant, we've significantly impacted their store, but we do know that they have more. We know that we haven't entirely eliminated their rocket arsenal, but that is really why we're continuing with these strikes to really eliminate any possibility that they could have to continue launching these rockets.
Okay. Captain Weiss, air attacks are taking place, and there are reports that ground attacks could happen. Between 5,000 to 9,000 troops have been put on standby. What more can you tell us about that?
That will be a decision for the political echelon here in Israel. The military is prepared for any potential scenario. Right now, our focus really maintains on those strikes, largely speaking from the air. But we will be ready for any instructions that we get if and when those come from the political level.
Right. Captain Libby Weiss, for the moment, many thanks for joining us here on India First.